just to see. So we're, see if we can get it.
So give me 1 second here because it's not, I need to make sure that it's going to come back to you. I'm not going to do a full screen.
Okay. Okay. I think we are. Wait, no, that's not it.
Okay. Do you see it now?
Okay. So I can still see it. Can you see? Can you click back in so you can see, or no? Or you can't, because if you do.
No, I can see both you, I can see me, and then I can see the artwork.
Okay, good.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay. No. I can see both you, I can see me, and then okay, why does it say test with Jill and screen share? Oh, I need to change the title of this. Okay. Bridge. Rename. Yeah. Looks good, and I can hear you.
Okay.
Edit post. Live talk with Jill Wells. Okay. Will that update, I hope? Okay, we got 2 minutes.
So I think just for the sake of avoiding any blackouts on the screen, I'll leave this view up for the artwork.
Okay. Okay, so there is about a 10-second delay. So
would it be possible, is there a way you can avoid hearing that feedback?
yeah, no, I'll turn my volume down. I just wanted to make sure that it was, but yeah, I can hear both.
Okay.
And then, okay. All right. So Jill, say something. Can you hear Jill?
Hey, Terry, how are you?
All right. Okay. All right. So you want me to start on this screen? You don't want me to start on this screen where you're a little bigger?
Whatever you're most comfortable with. I'm going to leave my screen this way, and if you can toggle back and forth, I think that's perfect.
Okay. That's what we'll do. Okay. Yep. All right. So we shouldn't have echo anymore because I turned down the volume on my phone. So I think we're all right. Okay. It's 7 o'clock.
All right.
Should we get started? Yay. All right. Okay.
7 o'clock on a Friday. If anyone wants to know how we spend our Friday, this is it.
This is it. Oh,
we got the candy on the front porch.
Yay! We haven't even bought any. Well, yeah, we got time. We got time. It's not till tomorrow night. We're trick or treating tomorrow night in Ames.
Oh, nice.
So, yes. Well, welcome everybody. Welcome. I see Katie and Heather and Rhonda are watching. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our conversation with Jill Wells this evening. Jill is an artist who's been doing artwork for 18, you're probably pushing 20 years, probably, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So our conversation with Jill Wells on African-American storytelling in 2020. I'm Terry Hofer, and this is the Octagon Shop. And it's part of the Octagon Center for the Arts in Ames, Iowa. Part of our mission here at the O is to encourage self-expression by providing inclusive space and opportunities that bring people together and add to our lives. And we also feel strongly about doing more than just stating our solidarity with people of color after every injustice that befalls them. And this obviously came to a glaring light for us after the George Floyd murder and the Breonna Taylor murder. Um, and so we also strongly believe that artists deserve to be paid for their work, and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color artists have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And it's been bad, it's been bad for all artists. But at the shop, we've been working on increasing the diversity of artists that are represented here in the shop. And the Outrage to Change project that we had here in July through Downtown Ames helped us connect with BIPOC artists in our community. And I'm so excited for you to get to know Jill this evening and experience her work through this discussion. Please share your thoughts and questions in the comments, and they will pop up on the screen and I can add them to the discussion. Jill, I want to thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you for sharing your gifts. And in your statement regarding Cotton Memoirs, this is one of the paintings in Cotton Memoirs, you state, my main objective is to have a conversation and communicate with my viewers, whether done internally or externally, and maybe both. And I'm so excited that I think we get to do both this evening. So yeah, it's really cool. So I'm going to stop now. Please introduce yourself to us, and let's just get going. And I'm going to, yeah.
Absolutely. So my name is Jill Wells. I'm an Iowa native, a Drake alumni. So I graduated in 2005 from Drake with a Bachelor of Fine Arts. I'm a Southsider. And I'm in Iowa.
Yeah, you froze. We have been having some freezing. So you said you were a Southsider was the last thing I heard.
Yeah, and then grew up in Indianola, Iowa.
Indianola.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I'm a multimedia visual artist.
Yes.
So I'm working on getting into some other areas when it comes to like more interdisciplinary arts. I've got some projects coming up, so we'll get into that, but that's kind of what led me down that path of looking into getting into different mediums.
Okay, wonderful. Let me know when you want me to switch screens, but I know one of our biggest questions that several people have asked in different ways, but what is the inspiration behind this series and the stories and the background in Cotton Memoirs?
The series actually started with the painting that I think the viewers see behind you, which we'll get to. So that's Graduation.
Say that one more time.
This piece is entitled Graduation. Mm-hmm. The inspiration behind the series really came from a lack of education that I received growing up in regards to my African American roots and a love for learning, to be honest. I am a firm believer that love should be something I continue to try to cultivate throughout my life. And so when I started this series, I was approaching my final year at Drake. And around that time, you start to, or at least the curriculum at Drake, you start to develop a thesis. And that thesis is a body of work. Through that series, you develop, whether it be multiple canvases or mixed media, and start to have a conversation that will help the viewer identify who you are as an artist in part. Mm-hmm. And so this series, I think, was just a long time in the making. I did not have a lot of knowledge of what the stories were behind the decades of these individuals' lives, right? So the ones we see here in this painting, their children, I did not have much awareness at all what some of their stories were. And when I started to try to find those stories, some of them are documented. So you have actual ex-slaves who have narratives now, which was different back in 2005. You can go to the internet and you just find them on YouTube. I did not have that. So I spent a lot of time at Cal's library and came across some books that had some of these images where I was drawn to the looks from the eyes of these individuals. And just, it was very compelling for me. And that's what inspired it, was really this first image. And, I continued on from that. So for the viewers, a lot of these paintings are black and white images from slaves in cotton fields. And so we've got some of those original images, which we'll toggle through, I think, towards the end of it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's what, uh, yeah, it's just, these are from actual photos.
Actual photos, actual men, women, children who really at that point went by numbers, not names. And at any given time, you might have had your child taken from the plantation that you worked on to a whole nother plantation in another state, and you'd never see your child again. So we don't really know who some of these people are. And at least I, being as skilled at that time as I felt like I could have been in making an attempt to identify and seek out information on any documentation of who they were. And it was very, very hard. I still don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how you could possibly have done that, um, which is heartbreaking, you know, when people can do genealogy and find information. If you're white, genealogy goes back, mine goes back to the 1600s, but obviously African Americans do not have, Black people do not have that story. It stops.
Yeah, there are big gaps. It's possible. Like, I know I have some friends who have done their genealogy.
Mhm.
I've never done mine past a certain point. So there are some records, and there were, some plantation owners that, I think maybe kept better records than others.
Yeah. So you've been painting for a long time, and you have, people may not know that you've got, your art is represented through lots of areas in Des Moines and Polk County, at the zoo and the YMCA, just some absolutely gorgeous paintings. Um, so what is the mindset of a career artist?
I would say an entrepreneurial mindset and spirit, for sure. You're your own business owner. And I would say the mindset of more of a marathon runner, a chess player mindset a little bit as well. There's a lot of strategy that sometimes goes unnoticed simply because the artist is, um, I think, operating. I mean, at least speaking for myself, I've operated a lot on the fly, but also from experience. So those two things for me, I'm not that great of a chess player, but I done a lot of long distance running. And so that's why I think I have those metaphors related to what's my mindset connected to the longevity of my career as an artist and how I overcome any type of adversities within this field. Every field is going to have adversity when it comes to, are you going to stick in that field or are you going to transition? And even in transitions, it's not easy. So I would say those two, just being very well aware. So for any artist who is watching and maybe hasn't had this conversation, if you're pursuing an art career, take some business courses, either online, maybe find yourself a mentor that can help you with how do you develop a brand? How do you utilize social media? How do you do your taxes?
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Let's see. How can art, I'm going to skip one and go on. How can art change narratives?
I think art can change narratives in a number of ways. One, it would be looking at what's the narrative first. So if we look at this series, this piece here in particular, when you zoom into the center of graduation, you see that the young girl in the center of the painting is wearing a graduation gown. She has a graduation cap on and she's holding a diploma. Right? The other individuals in this painting are painted in fabrics that would not have been their traditional fabrics of the clothes that they would have been wearing at that time. Also, the young girl in the center of the painting has a pair of shoes on.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't common. I'll just put it to you that way.
Right.
I can't say for sure. Each plantation was drastically different, but it just wasn't common.
Right.
So the narrative in this one, I tried to change because one, when I looked at these individuals, I just felt for them. I couldn't wrap my head around, and I still can't, the idea of slavery. Most people, when they think about being forced to do something that they don't want to do, they don't like that idea, let alone having to do that your whole life.
Oh,
I would change the narrative and
yeah. You paused
did it
again.
freeze?
Yep, we froze again. So,
Mhm. So I wanted to change the narrative in graduation and have a conversation with the viewer that is showing one, what I feel like in a small way, as best as I could at the time when I created this, was my idea and the thought that can I give them something that I feel like they deserve? Can I change that part of the narrative? I can't go back in history, but they are kings and queens. Can I adore them in silks and satins, right?
right. Oh, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And then the gal in the center, she's graduating.
Yeah.
Like that in itself. And I remember feeling like she's graduating out of this environment,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like if one would say, I remember someone saying like the school of hard knocks, which, in a way I am like, yeah, I kind of get that analogy. But like this goes far beyond hard knocks, right? Mhm.
Yeah.
So I think artists can do it in that way. You can take something and flip it on its head and changing the narrative. And that could be with whatever narrative you are wanting to change.
Yeah, and it's so important now. It just seems so much more important these days. What are some of the biggest lessons learned from the journey of African American storytellers?
Um, I would say, and I'm going to try to advance the image after we
Okay. Yeah.
get past this question.
Okay.
I would say from this series, at the time, I didn't know what I know now. And one of the things that I felt was extremely eye-opening was how trauma actually is encoded, like so toxic stress, exposure to toxic stress and traumatic events repeatedly, especially,
Mhm.
is encoded in one's DNA, and it can actually change biologically, right? So
Right.
what does that mean, right? So for somebody who doesn't maybe like at the time I didn't, I had to go through many years of research and then some lived experience, even being a counselor and studying what is stress, what chemicals, what hormones are excreted in the brain when one goes through stress, what type of responses the brain is hardwired to trigger one to do in response to stress. And then how can that actually change someone's DNA? Like, so neuroscience has been a pioneering field when you think about providing answers to those questions, right?
Yeah.
And so for people, sometimes I think when the narrow storyline
Oh, you froze again.
gets injected into the conversation,
Yeah.
when a narrow storyline,
Mhm.
like a narrow storyline, so a stereotype, right? So let's say the stereotype of um, the black male as a rapist, right? So during Jim Crow era, like where did that come from? Um, the angry black woman. I hate even saying it. I'll be honest. I can't stand, that is a very narrow storyline. It is a stereotype.
Right.
And so I always wonder, where does that come from? So if we go backwards and even try to find a little inkling potentially, and again, this is from some of the, I'm not a expert in the area. If we know that trauma can change DNA, right? If we know it can hardwire people to be hyper vigilant to certain responses of any stress level, maybe, just maybe, that might provide somewhat of a greater understanding of who someone truly is, besides what they perceive to be the stereotype that they have adopted to be the truth.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that's
Oh.
packed into now
Yeah, there's a lot that's packed into, you said.
the conversations that we're having now.
Mhm.
And so for me, this is what comes out of these paintings, right? But I think you have to have the conversations that oftentimes people don't really feel comfortable having. The current climate is allowing us, I think, to have those conversations. So, and that way, it's allowing us to kind of get back to where maybe we had left off,
Right.
if that makes sense.
No, that does make sense. I think that leads into another question that someone had uh, that said, "Is it important that artists respond to current events, or should artists make work that prompts conversations on social issues?" And that ties into another question about social and current events in art and current storytellers. So what you learned from narrow stereotypes and such, and trauma, and all the things that have been going on in the last few years, how important is it for artists to respond?
Reflecting current times is something I find myself just naturally doing as an artist.
Hmm.
So this piece here is entitled, yeah, thank you. I would make an attempt for the viewers to make it even larger. However, we learned that when running some test trials, it didn't go so well. So if you guys want to see these closer, message me and I can send you any images of them so you can see them in detail, because there's a lot, unfortunately, in the little nooks and crannies of this piece.
I believe they
That
can see it
Mhm.
on your website.
Yeah,
Okay.
on my website, you'll find
Oops.
it, and I'll put that link in the description below. On my Instagram, and I can put that handle in the description below as well. It is entitled Time, History, and Parallel Realms. So it's pretty fitting with the question in regards to reflecting current times. I think most of us who have been around for long enough to experience time repeating itself or history repeating itself, um, that's an answer to the question in regards to if an artist is looking to respond to that. If it hasn't come up once in their life, it'll probably come up again. And so if they feel like, hey, I wasn't wanting to have that conversation then, but I'm wanting to have it now, or I feel like I'm able to have it now,
Mhm.
The other piece to that I feel is important to make known is that for anyone who perceives art to be um, compartmentalized and where like Black art needs to look a certain way,
Oh,
this is not the only style of work that I do. This is not the only narrative visually that I have in this way. And there's a lot of other artists who work in abstract, which I do as well, and other forms that that the viewer might not readily perceive to be quote unquote Black art. Um, and I just want to put that out there for anyone who, maybe has some of those notions, not knowing who all the audience members are, just wanting to be open in communication. It's not a disrespectful thing. There's a lot about art and styles of art making that I'm sure I might have some preconceived notions about as well. But I want to definitely put that out there. So when artists respond to the time, they're all going to do it differently.
yeah.
I think it is important because it keeps the conversation moving forward in ways that aren't just visual. And when you do look around the world, there's so much integrated that is art that's something about, like your cell phone. Right? The design of cell phones, the design of computers, the design of prosthetics, for people who need those, right? There's engineering, um, there's language as an art form. There's the art form of communication, and not all of that is done verbally. So I think that those conversations can be had again by different forms of art and then different types of artists.
Yeah, that's very important. And I like what you said, that there is no Black art. I mean, you can't put anybody in a box. You can't put a group in a box. Um, so um, there was a question about misconceptions of BIPOC and female artists. Do you want to address that question?
Well, do they have any specifics so I don't go too tangential with this? Because I have I have a tendency to get very because I can go in a lot of different directions.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it was one that was submitted earlier, misconceptions of BIPOC and female artists. I know that, you know, uh, is there a misconception that BIPOC and women get overlooked? Um,
Mhm.
have you experienced that in
Mhm.
your career?
Yeah, and when it comes to being a female artist and a female artist of color, I can speak from my personal experience. I can speak from some of the learned experience I've had with working with other artists of color and working with other female artists. Uh, to talk about where women fit into the art world, to me, is very complex.
Right.
So when you look around at statistics when it comes to this, because I think that helps provide driving home the point that this is a real thing and not just a lived experience or individual perception. Right. When you look at within the United States, we have predominant industries for auction houses with art. We have predominant museums, right? There's some fantastic sites that give some of these statistics for anyone who wants to look that up also. Um, across the board, when you look at, let's say, like 18 to 20 of those predominant huge institutions when it comes to like the MoMA, things like the Guggenheim, these museums, about 75% of the um, individuals in those museums are white individuals. So around 70, I think it's like 70, yeah, like 77% are men.
Yeah.
Um, Within the Met alone, I think it's like 4% women, but there's like 80 some percent when you look at the images that are in are nude women.
Mhm.
All right, so what does that mean, right? We have men.
I know what my husband would say. Men are pigs. But
I'm just saying, like, I know I took fine arts. I have studied the figure. I have had nude models in my class, male and female. I get the point of studying the human figure. I get it.
yeah.
But one could really make the argument. One could really make the argument that we have a misrepresentation of us as women and an objectifying of us as bodies. So you don't want our work in your museum, but you want our bodies there.
Yeah. I never thought of
Right?
that. Good point. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so a female really starts to question, where do I fit in this world? If I am a woman who has pursued this and has made a determination, this is what I want to do. Now, what do I do? Because I only see myself like this here. And it's hard. And that's the reality of what a lot of us women are up against. And I have a lot of smart men in my life that are artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not blaming them
Right.
for the system at all. I love to collaborate with them. It goes back to the original question, like, what are some of the stereotypes? What are some of the notions that are connected to female artists, let alone BiPOC community? So a lot of that does translates right over to people of color, right? So in this painting here that we have time, history, and parallel realms, there's this split that's taking place within this painting as well, right? The painting does begin, it's a visual narrative. It was at that time my way of being able to create a mural that was like everything I would want it to be. But because I had a mural at that time, I'm like, let me just build these canvases that are 7 feet long. And so I got 14 feet to work with. I built these with my grandfather.
Oh,
And it was I know. It was one of the coolest experiences I ever had. I was even pregnant at the time.
Oh,
I know.
oh,
So with my belly and my grandpa, and I would carry these around. I would carry them in and out of the FAC building at Drake.
oh, no.
I'd hold the door with like 1 foot.
I'm like,
I got really good at it. Yeah, I would just
that
fly
too
around with these
heavy.
things like it was a duffel bag.
Oh, yeah, no, you couldn't. You weren't rolling those up. No.
Mm-mm.
Um,
No.
wow. And they're so beautiful. These were this was also hanging in the library for Outrage to Change. And it was really something to go up close and look at that painting. Is really remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you like explain a little bit about what we see over here, and then as it transitions into the middle and then on into the right. So on the far left,
On the far left is where it begins. So I laid it out like one would read a book from the left to the right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a young girl the young girl gets older throughout the mural. And the way I tried to connect that for the viewer is that she always has a yellow dress on.
Oh,
And
lovely.
yeah. So she always has a yellow. And then as she gets older, her cloak becomes her apron. And so it's the same color.
Oh, wow.
Mhm. So this piece is a diptych. So Michelle Bolton King's asking, hey, Michelle. Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome.
And so she's here on the left. She is in a, it looks like a small little boat. It's
It's a
the
slave.
best rendition I had at the time of a portion of the slave boats
Yeah.
that would carry the slaves. Yeah. So, and then underneath the cloud coverage is a larger ship. So you
Yeah. And it's hard to see on the
kind of get
screen.
the two in one. He's looking out.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah. It's hard to see
mhm.
on the screen, but when you see it in
And
person or look on your website, you can see that there is a ship there and people on the coast too. There's people on the wall.
yes.
Yeah.
And so then above her, we see these clouds opening up. There's a purple, and then it goes into a yellow, and then you see almost what looks like an angel on her shoulder. So that's the parallel realm that's
Cool.
running parallel throughout the whole story. So there's these series of angels, and for, any, viewer that's, got different beliefs, it's universe. So it hopefully it kind of speaks to all individuals and basically having a conversation that there's some other forces at work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so, just knowing what my belief system is, not wanting to push, those are the images I chose to go with because that's, my belief system. Right. So she's got this angel here, and the angel continues also throughout the diptych, right? So she's also in the second panel right above the same girl and then her husband at that time. And so she's got the same dress on as well. She's got kind of like a blue black hair.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So she's kind of like the alpha and the omega in a way. So she's like the beginning and the end in part.
Oh.
And then we've got another angel. He has an hourglass on his back. He's right towards the end of the first panel. And
Uh-huh.
he's like father time. So that's what the hourglass is. And he's pulling back this curtain of time. So you see that now time has passed once you get to the second panel.
Mm-hmm.
And so below him in the first panel, below father time, you see a wall. There's two individuals leaning up against the wall and in silhouette. You see a cotton field open up. And then there's the young girl there. And she's basically at her new quote unquote home, right? So
Right.
she's arrived to the plantation.
Yeah.
Um, And so it takes you kind of on this journey of how she um, just deals with the situation. And so there's some other things that happen there. It's kind of hard to explain because it's hard to see, but as time passes, she does actually end up getting married. She's walking up in the second panel, which at the time, I'll be honest, is me flipping the script again, because that's not something that was really ever allowed. You would have to go to the plantation owner, your slave master, and say, "Can I get married?" Typically, no.
Right.
So there's all these real big, like opportunities for me to change the narrative. And as many times as I possibly could, I did, but I also wanted to educate. That was something that was really constantly on my mind throughout the series, because again, I didn't have that education growing up. So I'm like, if this is my opportunity to educate other people, then there's got to be some truth still within this. I can't just change the narrative 100%,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Right.
Okay.
But well, you're the artist. You can make it whatever you want. But
Yeah.
but but it tells a beautiful story, and I think there's a little bit of hope in it. Because it just it was really hard to see. Oh, that's I don't. You had to look for a minute to find that slave ship and to realize that's where the beginning was, and then
Mhm.
to see the progression of the story. It's just a remarkably beautiful painting. It's
Mhm.
wonderful.
Thank you. So the very, very last portion of the panel, where you see on the far right, so two is her husband washing her feet. Yes. So flipping the script again, it's not marrying Jesus, but it does talk about in the book of John, the washing of the feet. So to answer Michelle's question, really good question. The washing of the feet in the book of John starts to talk about, to try to keep this kind of not taking too much away from the word or adding to the word, who your real, who you endow yourself to. So like looking at the first panel, the end of the first panel, there's a slave owner, right? This is her owner, her master, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
So in the King James Version of the Bible, it talks about your master in heaven. So you think about the Lord, the Father. So you have this angel that's kind of coming through the window, and then it's more of a depiction of trying to pull those two things together. Like, yes, these individuals had a master on, in that physical realm, right? Someone that governed their entire lives, told them what to do, when to do it. And then, and it gives me goosebumps even thinking about it. Then I start to question, like, well, where does someone even find the will to continue to get up and live then?
Right.
And that's where that spiritual side comes in. If you see your reality in the physical realm, but you believe that there's something beyond that, that is to me a beginning of an answer of how somebody endures that type of a situation. So how someone would, again, I'll never be able to wrap my head around it because I know it still continues to exist in this day. Like there's sex slaves, there's sex trafficking. I mean, there's still slaves that like whatever you wanted them to do. Like, so
Yeah.
that last part talks about, this washing of the feet and these two individuals looking at each other, kind of like it's like we know, they know between the two of them. It's kind of like a secret in a way. It's like this is something that's sacred, that's ours. This is, not something that he can take away from us.
Oh, that's very touching. It's very moving. I find, so this work you did when you were doing your finishing your college career at Drake, and did you have and you found these beautiful photos for the painting behind it. Now, and yes, let's pull up this one bigger, a little bit bigger. and that one is hanging here too. Is that one also from a photograph?
It is. Yep. This one's entitled William's Gaze. My son loved to look at this all the time. So he would just gaze at it for hours and like fall asleep to it. So that's why it's got that title. And in the foreground is again that flip. So you have a young girl in a judicial robe. There's a young baby on the girl's lap, and it's in like a baptismal gown. And then the book is The Legal Status of the Negro by Charles S. Morgan. And so that book, for anyone who's looking for it, you can find it online. You can get the whole PDF version of it for free, download it. And it's a very fascinating book, and it tells the legal transitions of an individual from state to state, and then throughout time as well. And so for an example, let's say, how do I put this? So let's say one of the slaves was raped by the master of the plantation. She's then pregnant, and then so she has the child. The child is maybe taken from her when it's let's say like a year old. So depending on what state that happened in,
Right.
and then what state the child would go to at the time of whenever the child was born and then transported from one state to another, their legal status would actually change. So the legal statute was not the same from state to state, and it was dependent upon the ratio of your blackness or your whiteness. And this book chronicles all of it.
Too, yeah. Oh.
So if you're like 1/4 this, it's like, yeah.
If they claimed, right? I mean, we didn't find out about Thomas Jefferson's children until recently, right?
Yes. And so when you think about that, I would in mind is what ratio was potentially given to them. So did it freeze?
Yep. So yeah, Thomas Jefferson's children.
Yeah, I would wonder what ratio they were given.
Yeah.
I would wonder if they received privilege because of that for a higher white ratio, quote unquote. And so then that way maybe they could be a house slave versus a field slave.
Yeah. So you did get a lot of inspiration for these works. Do you pull inspiration because your current work is different? We're gonna so tell us about this. Is this? Oh yeah.
This is called the Cotton Exchange.
Oh.
So Edgar Degas did a painting that actually was entitled the same thing, and so
Oops, you froze.
It's a combination of his painting.
Repeat that. Yeah, repeat that. Yeah, it's a combination of Degas.
So he did a painting entitled The Cotton Exchange.
Yes. Okay.
And so it is actually a combination of his painting and then a couple other images. So they're kind of collaged together into this painting. And then the actual text around the outside is a text from my family. On my mother's side, her father's side of the family, they actually own slaves. So I'm trying to think, it was his.
And your mother, people probably don't know, right? She was.
So my mother, when you look at her ethnicity, it's a combination. Her mother's German, and then her father is Native American.
Okay.
In part.
Uh-huh.
And so his side of the family in particular, they own slaves, and I'm trying to remember back. It's his father's father, so his father's father, so his great.
Wow.
And so it talks. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, and so what does it say? So the text says again. Could you explain again what it says?
It talks about what will be passed down.
Okay. Like
right.
Okay. And as in people?
Everything, actually. So one of the slaves that they owned, they actually willed a horse to one of the slaves.
Oh.
But they do pass down, just like property, the slaves.
Yep. Oh, so.
And so for me, I did not learn this. I didn't learn this until I was, again, I would have been right around 21, 22.
Wow. And was your mom able to tell you that story, or?
I don't even think she knew about it until her and I spoke about it, and my grandfather, and I'm not even sure that my grandfather would have said anything if he didn't know I was working on this series. So when you think about the stories and the stories that are told, right, when we talk about African American storytellers, the reason I wanted to have this conversation is, one, those were my storytellers, these individuals who I've never met. And sometimes I wonder, did I ever meet any of their relatives and I just never knew it?
Yeah.
I don't know. They could be walking around right now in Des Moines, Iowa. I don't know. But when I look at their faces through these images, they, like there's a conversation that starts to take place, and that's the internal part of the conversation. Like when people talk about the eyes speak 1,000 words, when you look back in history, it's happening even to this day, right? We're in the midst of it. These conversations, these stories that we tell each other, sometimes verbally or non-verbally, right? And then once we have that and we're maybe in the midst of going through it, what other stories come out? This one came out for me. I'm studying this, I'm going through my thesis work, I'm learning, and that prompts a conversation between me and my grandfather where he tells me this story, that within my family,
Yes.
this is what happened. I really was conflicted about that. And it's hard because I've got both sides, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's, and phew, boy, I get tongue tied because there's just so many things going around in my head, but your work is just so beautiful. I see little Grant Wood style in these. Would you? Is that
Yeah.
okay to say that?
Yeah, no, it is. And when I did my thesis work, that was something that did come up. I love Grant Wood. I love Thomas Hart Benton. Oh my gosh, he's probably, if I had to choose between the two, I would choose Thomas. Yeah. So I was very much influenced by other artists, and trying to find your style or your hand or your look is something that I don't think ever changes. Your story as a creator, the story you tell sometimes calls for a different language, right? Quote unquote. And that language might be abstract
Right.
versus realism. If that helps you tell this story in a way that really connects with your viewer, you got to find a way to do it. And so it's tricky sometimes.
A fun question that we got is, what time of day do you find yourself the most artistic?
Unfortunately, late.
You're a night person?
Uh, yeah.
Why is that
I
unfortunate? Why is that a bad thing?
Then my sleep is off.
Oh,
My sleep is off. I do a lot of research during the day,
uh-huh.
and I do other projects. Um, I work another part-time job. And so and really my son, he's 13,
Oh,
and being able to create like that was one of the questions that came through also. That
say that, repeat,
is
repeat.
aided
Your son is 13 and what?
in creating a work-life balance between when I create
Yep,
and when I can have, his time. That is aided if I work at night as well.
right.
Because I can't keep him up to, he might want to stay up till like 1 or 2 a.m. playing, and like he would if I let him.
Oh, yeah. I had the privilege of meeting him. He's a beautiful, beautiful person. Um, uh, when creating, oh, this
I
one.
know. I'll pass that one because
Okay, all right.
it's super deep.
When creating, do you go with what speaks to your heart, or you try to create what you think will sell? And I think everybody can probably knows the answer to that question without you even having to answer it.
Um, Definitely my heart goes first, and then I try to find a way to um get to what sells. And that's really challenging, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
It was not something I ever thought about when I was in the thick of, going to college. You literally were so focused on how to build your skill. You did not have the conversation on how to be a business person or how to sell work, how to connect with an audience, how to find your lane. Those conversations came much later after I graduated. And I kind of felt like I was always catching up. And so trying to define like what sells will be easier to find once you know who you are as an artist.
Right.
It's tricky. I have done commission work that the whole time. Oh, did it freeze?
Yep. Yep. It did again. Sorry. I apologize, everybody, for the freezing. So, okay, but it does.
I have done work before, Terry.
Uh-huh.
I have done commissions before where I was not happy while I was doing them just because it was so far out of my wheelhouse, but I needed to, pay the bills and I needed the work.
Yep.
And somewhere in the midst of doing that, I had to find the mindset that if this is going to help me build my skill, then that's what I gain from it. I may, so it's kind of like, let me find my happy place and not be like first world probleming the situation, because that'll happen. Like there's other people in dire strait who would be looking at this situation like, you're blessed, you need to stop complaining it. So I would get there eventually.
Well, yeah,
But
I mean,
moments where I'm like,
would it be, that you could just like paint whatever you wanted, and and everybody would snap it up.
right.
But I mean, yeah. Well, we're running short on time, and this is a beautiful painting that you have brought up here, and so if you could tell us about this one, because this is totally. It looks like a totally different subject matter than what we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. So transitioning, I think anyone who follows my work will notice one of my absolute favorite things to do is color saturation. I work in oils primarily, and it allows me to get really rich kind of luxe colors. And these casts from like moving from dark to light, I use to have a conversation with the viewer and tell a story. And like you from a situation that might be really challenging, really difficult, towards remaining hopeful and being resilient, which is something that I've always um, focused on, I think, throughout my work, but I've gone about how to show that in a way that's different. Kind of like you said, it's a transition of what the look is. This piece is really inspired by a lot of the things that have happened over the past year. So there's a young girl who is kind of taking a leap of faith off this big pile of what looks like a bunch of junk.
Uh-huh.
And she's reaching for something that does not seem like it will at all be able to withhold her weight. So this very delicate butterfly, right?
Yes.
And so it's entitled The Things We Will Overcome.
Oh,
And the very bottom of the stack is a book. On top of that book, there's a pile of money. Then there is a young seedling that starts to kind of sprout out of another stack of books. There's a ladder, there's a clock, there's a set of keys, there's a heart, there's a compass, there's a computer, there's tools for like drafting, like architectural tools, and then there's this balance of stones. And right behind that, there's a ruler. So iconography is the use of images to tell a story. Whenever people look at art, another kind of point I want to make is that artists are very typically, I'll just speak for myself, very intentional about the images I chose. And that was something that was driven home by my professor, her name's Angela Battle at Drake University. And I'll never forget, she's like, you need to be very mindful of the images. It's kind of like, I'm not just gonna, I mean, I could if I so chose, but I'm usually going to try to find the absolute best words to have a conversation, like let's say just between you and I here. I know there's other people listening, right? I'm usually going to be very intentional about what I say. And I'm not just going to say some random thing because you're going to be like, what are you talking about? Right. You're like, I wasn't even talking about that, Jill. Like, you're often like, what do you know? So it's all about that storytelling, and how I tell my story is I really think about what is going to be the best visual. And this is, for visuals, which there's other populations I think that uh, unfortunately I can't reach because I'm a visual artist. And so I'm looking to do that in the future. So like maybe sight impaired is an example, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Michelle said, is this oil on canvas? Or yeah, so it's a collage. It's a combination. So it's a mixed media, Michelle. Good question. The background is all oil. The foreground is all collage.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
And they can
Mm-hmm.
see this on your website too.
Definitely on my website, on Instagram. And so, yeah, I'll have those again.
Yeah.
And so these things all add up. And that's what I felt like was going on this year. So to go back to one of the original questions as well, responding to what I was going through this year, what I saw our community going through, what I saw us as a nation going through, what I felt, just like the universal vibrations of all of it, and it started to impact me in a way I wouldn't have thought. And it led me to making some decisions that I didn't think I was going to ever honestly make. And so I found myself taking a leap of faith this year.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, it goes right back to the social and current events, um, and I think it is important that artists respond to current events. We think, at least, that artists do make change, but people need to respond and make change themselves. And
Exactly.
yeah,
And
so
so I felt like that was happening with the Octagon. I felt like that's happening with some other individuals in their lives that, I'm privileged to be a part of. And so my hope for us, as a people, as human beings on this planet that we are blessed to live in, I hope that that will happen in a way that's positive for all human beings. I know that's a very big hope.
yeah, it goes back to your Amy's comment, your leap and grabbing onto that butterfly. I think is just, yeah, hopefully will make some change. And you certainly are a catalyst.
Yeah, because you're like, I hope this butterfly will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those catalysts for change. Within obstacles, there can be opportunities.
Yes.
And there's a lot of obstacles in front of all of us now. Some of those obstacles, depending on what they are bigger than others for people. When you're thinking about mothers and fathers who, are going through the loss of loved ones,
Mm-hmm.
and a whole other host of things. It's, when I think about the trials and tribulations I've been through, it's like you just hope something's going to get you through, and that's kind of like that butterfly, like, oh man, do not let me down. You might not look like a lot right now, but I believe you're going to get me through. And right now, if I don't, then this whole thing's going to come falling down from underneath me because it's not looking that stable. That,
Yeah.
it just seems everything's piling up and piling up. Like at some point, like I gotta, because, and so I hope that for all of us, that there's something that we have that will carry us through so we don't give up. Like we are a resilient people.
Right. I mean, a lot of times I think it's like, well, you don't really have a choice. Sometimes,
Yeah.
like you have a child, you have to keep plugging away. So we technically we're out of time, but you have, like I mentioned at the beginning, you have some beautiful work at the zoo in Des Moines and the YMCA, the West Wing of the Polk County Jail, Creative Visions Human Development Center, and Iowa Lutheran Hospital. I forgot to mention that one. Is there, and this one is a mixed media piece. This one is a mixed media piece. Is there any other mediums that you've always wanted to work in, but you haven't?
Yeah, that's one thing I was kind of touching on. There's some tactile work I'm looking to get into. So with some upcoming projects I have, one of them is the disability rights mural that I'm working on.
Ooh.
And so it kind of hits close to home with some individuals in my life. But there's a lot I have to learn, not only from the standpoint of the subject matter, but also the medium. So I'm trying to reach a base of individuals that have needs that I have not yet been able to meet, right? And so I want to figure out, how do I do that? So I'd like to start to work with more sound as an art medium. And I'd like to start to work with tactile surfaces, whether those are reliefs, sculptural elements. Those are two I'm really focused on right now that I'd like to work with. Oh,
that sounds really exciting. Yeah. I don't know about you, but I can't hardly make the same thing twice. So
I'm with you.
I think it's, for me, I think it's just attention deficit. I just can't. I can't.
I can do usually like color. I can match color and repeat it pretty easy, but other things,
yes,
a little bit more challenging. So if I can do a quick shout out and just let some of the viewers know about some of the artists in their community that they can follow.
Yes, please.
All right. So some current storytellers. I got a list here.
Okay.
And then I know you and I have time, so I don't want to be disrespectful of that. So for audience that's listening, some of your storytellers that are running community do an amazing job. Did it?
Say that again. Yeah, do it again.
For our community, for anyone who's listening or who's going to tune in later, I want you to know some of your storytellers within your area that you can reach out to. Amazing creators, providing any number of mediums. So Juliana Jones, Cameron Gray, Marissa Hernandez, Jordan Weber, Miradu Joseph, Justin Roberson, Julia Franklin, Zach Frazier, Aminda Tate, Mitchell Squire, Ivan Jones, Cub Stevens, Lavender and Lime, Billy B. Wells, Angela Williams, Shannon Simon Sellers, and Michelle Bolton King. All these are individuals within your community. Did it buffer?
No, I'm just like nodding my head. I was going to type them as you said them, but you went too fast. I was going to put them in the comments. But we'll add those in later.
You want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely send them to you as well,
right,
Terry.
And several of those names, people would, did participate in Outreach to Change. Some of them are artists here at the Octagon shop, which we're extremely proud to say. And we have other. We're going to have some more announcements for things in the future that we're working on. So excited about that. So,
Terry, you're awesome. I love it.
I was never a cheerleader in high school, but anyway.
But you're a good one now.
I had a question that was texted to me. Do you have any prints of What We Will Dream Will Overcome? Do you have any prints of that one available?
This is a brand new piece. Literally, it just finished curing. If anyone would like prints, I can definitely do. Yeah.
So that means it's going to come into the shop.
I can help them out with that.
We're going to hang that piece right here, right? Is that
absolutely
okay? So
I got you.
Yeah. So I should say, that we do have. Let me get untangled here. So we have 3 of the cotton memoirs here at the shop that you can see, but then Jill's going to take them down at the end of November, and then we'll have time for, then we'll be able to see some of her newer work or some of her different work. So that's exciting. But if you want to come into the shop and see these pieces, at least up close, and of course the other places that we mentioned, I don't know what their open hours are, but you know, the zoo one is by the dolphins and stuff, right?
Yeah, so the underwater piece at the zoo is it's in the water lab, so it's the lower level of the main building.
Say that again.
So yeah, it's like an underwater under the sea.
Yeah.
The lower level of the main building at the zoo, it's called the water lab.
Yeah.
And it's a wing, it's like an L-shaped wing, so that it goes the whole L shape of the wing from top to bottom, end to end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I would have known I would have clued into that when I was there and saw that was yours.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, I was like, oh, because I saw it on the website and I'm like, oh, duh. All right, well, we should wind this up. Thank you so much, Jill, for doing this for us. And I can't tell you enough what your work means. And hopefully we will continue these conversations with more artists, and you know, because obviously the pandemic is not stopping, and I don't want people to worry, but we decided I shouldn't wear my mask while I was talking, you know, during the video, but we do even, I mean, we never get a lot of people in here, but we do keep masks on, and we also have an air cleaner. It's a big building, but the rest of the building is shut off, but we do have the shop, and we have the community gallery in the room next door. I think people are very excited to see some of your new work. Oh, I see. So she's over your shoulder, isn't she?
Yes.
Yes. And I can't make Jill big, but now, and Julia says, thank you, Jill. And remember, JillWellsArt.com. And Heather says, love your shirt, Jill.
Yes, so, rock the vote.
Yes. So please go out and vote. We've been working on that. We have a big vote sign in our window at the shop. And we have a contest for people to do a poster about voting and encouraging people to vote, and they'll win a $25 gift certificate. But anything quickly, Jill, that I did not cover that you want to make sure. So we had a shout out to the artists, Juliana and Cam and Jordan and stuff. Anything else that we want to stick in here first?
Honestly, no, but if you get me going, we'll be here for another hour.
Exactly. All right, so we'll shut it down. I'm going to end the broadcast. Thank you guys for participating, and thank you for your encouragement and your questions. And absolutely, and thank you, Jill.
My pleasure. Thank you, Terry. Have a good one.
All right. Okay, you too.
Bye, everyone.